Hello, and welcome to all the truth seekers that have joined us today from across the globe. I'm glad that you've decided to join this online community. For the next hour, my goal is to help you uncover ways to evolve, grow, and change against the current thinking inside your business. My name is Mark McKelsey, and I lead the people and projects that bring you education, trends, and next practices from Global Market Development Center. The Infocast that you're watching will make your lunch hour profitable by delivering ideas that it can help you future-proof your company by implementing consumerism at every level. In other words, I want you to be adaptive while thinking about powerful new concepts to connect with your customers. How you respond to this session will determine your effectiveness to generate results and show your success with your trading partners. So without further ado, let's jump into it. I'm coming to you live from Chicago and have Mike Anthony joining me today. Mike is the CEO and founder of Engage in Bangkok, a firm specializing in shopper insights and activation. The title of this session is Disruptive Shopper Marketing, so what's next? Today's Infocast is going to help you understand the value of insights and how increasingly important they are in a marketplace where growth is hard and without the proper data points, nearly impossible. With the rise of consumerism that we have seen dramatically over the past 5 years, the retailer and brand supplier are no longer on the top of the food chain, which means the only way to uncover opportunity is to track consumer thinking and shopper behavior intimately. But even more important than that, retail reaction times to help that shopper find what they need at the right time, in the right place, is the difference between survival and the opposite, dying. We live in an instant gratification world where the consumer is in control. So if brick and mortar cannot adapt as quickly as the mindset of their customers, they lose mind and wallet share just as fast. That being said, physical retail faces an inflection point this year. The operational efficiencies that drove consistency of buying in the past no longer works today. In fact, I would argue that it has worked for too long, which has allowed the mobile shopper revolution to take hold even faster than anyone expected. As margins continue to be squeezed and fierce value competition rises, the future has to be about leveraging the right data with the right actions and picking a trading partner who can align with that works with you most closely is the one you need to start working with. So, before we get started and dive in, I wish to remind our viewers that we can take questions during or after the session by using a Q&A button at the top of the screen. We'll get to those at the end of the hour. So let's get started. Back over to you, Mike.
So we moved quite a long way in there. And I've been consulting for a wide range of organizations. We've been very blessed as Engage. We're a small company, but we've managed to work with many of the major leading consumer goods companies in the world, covering soft drinks and personal care, telecoms, OTC, pretty much every consumer industry there is. And that's what we've used to build the insight that goes into our business, the insight that went into the book, the insight that goes into the Shopper Marketing Experts platform as well. And at its heart, really, what our business tries to do is to build on what we've seen both as practitioners and as consultants. And one of the big challenges and why we called our business Engage was about bringing businesses together, about helping them engage better with consumers, shoppers, and retailers, and helping businesses engage internally. How do we connect and integrate, if you like, what we're trying to achieve with consumers through what that means in terms of shoppers and in terms of channels, and through what that means in terms of developing a more integrated marketing mix and making better investment decisions. So in a nutshell, that's what our business does. If you want to know a little bit more about that, we'll be sharing my email address at the end, and we have the usual websites and everything is. But I know you haven't come here to listen to an introduction from me. So let's crack straight on in to this. And don't forget, if you do have any questions, please pop them into the chat button as we go on. So let's kick off into the first story. And again, I'm not necessarily going to share something mind-blowingly different here. I think there is so much commentary about what's going on. I think what is interesting to me is what I see globally. It's not just one market doing this and one market doing that, but there is a global shift in what is happening. And the net result, if you like, is certainty to uncertainty. And this chart almost surprises me every time I present it because the dates just remind me of how recently the world has changed. Most of us who've grown up in the consumer goods industry for most of our lives working in it have known one dominant trend for about 60 years, up until around about 2012, 2013, and that was a trend towards one-stop shopping. My parents saw the beginnings of this trend as small independent stores got rolled up into a supermarket offer that offered groceries. That offer then added in newspapers and magazines and greetings cards. We added in music and then video. We added in dry goods, wet goods, frozen, fresh, adding all the time. And I think, Mark, to your point of this model may have been dominant for too long, the latency and the inertia is not really that surprising. This is a trend that globally was going on. This was what was going to happen. People were increasingly buying more things in one basket all of the time. And then around about 6 years ago, around the world, something quite surprising happened. Not that this trend slowed, because trends slowed, not even that this trend began to stop, but the trend began to reverse. And we started seeing something differently happening in the way people shopped. And again, what's fascinating for me, if I look at the data points around the world, it's happened everywhere. This is not a phenomenon in developed markets or developing markets. This phenomenon is happening everywhere. The triggers, the outcomes might be different, but the trend is global. So what we're seeing is this consolidated basket of one-stop shopping is being broken apart. Little bits broken away by curated specialists. Here we see, so what we see here is, as I get back on track, the growth of curated specialists. Now, of course, not everyone wants to buy masses of cheese from an organic cheese shop, but what we see is that this takes a tiny and possibly a lucrative slice away from that big store model, that dominant one-stop shop model, which is driven by one simple idea. We will get lots of people to buy lots of stuff, lots of times in the same place. Online, offline curated content isn't going to kill that model on its own, but it does take away a tiny, tiny slice of that business. We see online bring super niches. Coffeebeanshop.co.uk will allow you to blend your own individual blend of coffee beans. Again, not for everybody, but again, taking away tiny, tiny slice of that one-stop shop pot. See, in the US, which is dominant in terms of subscription shopping. Not everyone wants to buy everything on subscription, but many people would probably want to buy one or two things on subscription, depending on their relationship with the brand as a consumer and a shopper. Subscriptions work where we have a strong need as a consumer for something consistently, but perhaps something that we really don't want to buy very often. Buying razors is not very exciting. Shaving is pretty important to me. I do it pretty much every day. So subscription and Dollar Shave Club is a fantastic model. Again, not right for everyone, not right for every category, but it does take away another tiny slice of the pie. The biggest surprise, I think, to many people commentating in the world has been the significant growth that we've seen from discounters. And again, the growth of discounters in virtually all parts of the world. Actually, the part of the world I'm in at the moment right now, Southeast Asia, is so far one of the few parts of the world where discounters have still yet to take a hold. And there are some economic reasons as to why that hasn't quite happened. But pretty much everywhere else in the world, we're seeing discounters grabbing significant share. Again, not everyone wants to buy everything from a discounter, but a few people, quite a lot of people, are looking to buy quite a lot of stuff, and that is undermining the one-stop shop model. And of course, when we say discounters, I still talk to industry leaders today, and they talk to me about discounters as though they were the Aldi stores of the early 90s, where very hard discounters, very limited ranges. But we see that discounters are adapting their model completely. These are Aldi stores and a Lidl store in Slovenia, of all places. Two shots that I take and often show these and say, name the retailer. And it takes around about 7 or 8 minutes before anyone can actually name Aldi or Lidl as the retailer shown in these pictures, because despite the fact that people have read about this, that people have heard about it, people are not really recognizing that a discounter isn't really a discounter anymore. A discounter actually seems to be operating and driving people to their stores primarily through convenience and speed of shop in most markets, rather than because it's just about price. The other dominating or strong growing offline retail channel is convenience stores. And I'm just showing you this because someone said to me once that these convenience stores, they're growing like a rash. And then I saw these two graphics of 7-Eleven and Family Mart in Taipei, Taiwan, and all the dots are red, and it does really look like a rash. In virtually every market in the world, the one offline channel that is growing that is not a discounter is convenience stores. They're growing everywhere, and even in places like Taiwan, where you'd think, looking at these maps, there is no possibility of there being space for another convenience store, more are opening. And the reason they're able to do that is because these retail operators are redefining what it means to be convenience. This is a convenience store in Thailand. You can just about see at the far right-hand corner in the distance, good old-fashioned CPG products. But basically, other than that, it looks like a cafe. These guys this is Family Mart, a Japanese company, and they are redefining what convenience means. In a world of online, in a world of mobile, convenience is no longer being able to buy a small packet of shampoo in the store down the bottom of my street. Convenience is food and beverage and ready to go, much more than it is anything else. And lurking behind all of this is e-commerce and online. And even that is shifting and morphing all of the time. Here are the 8 most popular, fastest growing types of models of retail that we're seeing online. I'm sure if I was to come back and present this in a year's time, there would be others. And what we're seeing, particularly in places like China, is this proliferation of different ways and different shopping models, from online shopping malls to marketplaces to pure B2B plays. We're seeing very, very differentiated e-commerce plays. Each one, again, taking a small piece of the pie. Each one attracting different shoppers for different reasons in different ways. And all of them being successful against the one-stop shop for the simple reason that none of these models are dependent on getting everybody to buy lots of stuff in one place. And that's really one of the big challenges that faces big box retail, is that they are probably the one model which is dependent on that enormous gain of winning lots of people with lots of product. And obviously in the future, things are changing. I'm not going to get my crystal ball out right now because I think there's plenty of other futurologists who can tell you more about what's going to happen. I don't necessarily know which different models are going to win, but it is clear that there is innovation out there. It's clear that we can see online going offline and offline going online. We can see pop-up stores like the one in the middle here in Korea. This is at a subway station with Tesco, with scannable LCD screens to help the commuter do their shopping. We see Amazon Dash, we see Internet of Things, all of these creating models that may potentially disrupt. And what's interesting is they will not necessarily disrupt each other, because all of these new retail models are not based on getting lots of people to shop in the same place and buy lots of things. They're all based out of niches. And that means that these new models are much better positioned to survive and thrive going forward than potentially the once dominant big box world. And the point that Mark said at the beginning about inertia, this is what supermarkets look like around the world. I could put any date on these pictures from the last 30 years and you probably wouldn't know whether I was making it up or not, unless they happen to be the categories that you work in. These stores haven't changed, and retail is really struggling to respond because it hasn't had to respond for such a very, very long time. So what does that leave us in terms of the implication? There's one global trend, and that's a trend away from one-stop shopping towards mightily fragmented shopping. What it also means is we can draw one conclusion, which is we don't know which model is going to win. And actually, it's unlikely at this stage that one model will win. There is no real evidence that says online will dominate and kill offline. In fact, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that both have their role to play. So we moved from a model where there was a dominant way of shopping and that led to a dominant retail design, if you like, to a world where that single retail model is no longer guaranteed. And the question, therefore, is what are the implications for brands and retailers of moving into a very, very different world from the world which pretty much our entire marketing was built out of? And if you think about consumer goods marketing, you think about 4Ps. 4Ps was first written down in 1954, so it's about 10 years before retail started really growing. But everything that's been said about marketing over that time, since we wrote down the 4Ps, has been said in this world of one dominant mode of shopping and one dominant retail model for grocery. And suddenly we're in a world where it's different. So what does it mean? Well, the first thing it means is more cost. Herb Sorensen, who some of you may know, and many of you will have heard of as a great author and a great thinker in terms of shopper research, he sort of says the supermarket was the most brilliant innovation, not because of the store, but because they managed to outsource the most expensive part of the supply chain. They managed to persuade shoppers that it was a really good idea to go to the store and pick up your own product and pack it and take it home yourself, outsourcing that expensive piece. And suddenly online has changed that. We have this big question, who's going to pay for that? We have more complexity. Manufacturers and retailers are alike are managing more channels. They're doing more activity, more promotions, but more activity across those channels. As retailers and retail channels struggle to find a competitive edge, there are more and more demands for differentiation from an industry which has been built for homogenization. All of that creates more complexity, and in any business, complexity equals cost. And yet the shopper has been led to believe that they can have all of this for free, and actually all at a better price than we used to get. So we see these bubbling up, but that's a bubbling up of cost. Of course, if all of these new channels are driving growth, all of that extra cost is fine. But unfortunately, all of these extra channels don't necessarily drive growth. As I say, when I do conferences, I don't clean my teeth any more frequently just because I buy my toothpaste online. So we're driving complexity and cost into a model without necessarily delivering any significant growth. Now, in any industry, that's a recipe for disaster. Let's have a look at some data from Europe. And this looks at the left at that build of retail space. So we see 4 core models. There's hypermarkets, supermarkets, discount stores, and convenience stores. Sorry, the legends dropped one line off there. And over a 12-year period, adding enormous amounts of capacity to selling space at retail. And then you look on the right at what that's done for productivity. Store productivity is crashing. It's picking up at the end, but across all of those models, we're seeing net declines of 20–25% in terms of store productivity on a per meter model. That's pretty unsustainable. If let's bring some data more up to date, this is from China, probably one of the most advanced e-commerce markets on the planet. And we can see what's happening to hypermarkets as both e-commerce, but also specialist on and offline players are eating away. On the right, you can see the penetration's actually holding up. People are still going to hypermarkets. The problem is they're not buying as much. That fragmentation model is played out in reality here. People are shopping less and they're buying less every time that they shop. That is destroying this model. And it's destroying this model at a time when retailers really need their existing models to work. We see a compounding process as one thing piles on top of another. Shoppers visit less and buy less when they visit. That drops revenue. Okay, great. We respond with price because, as retailers know, the best way to respond, the quickest way to respond is on price. That reduces margins. And at the same time, retailers are trying to extend services. realizing that they need to provide things like an online offer. They need to upgrade services in their offline stores. That increases operating costs. And all of this means that the physical assets, things like stores, which were and used to be great sources of competitive advantage, are now hanging a little bit like an albatross around the neck, and that's reducing the returns on capital employed. Retail businesses simply become less profitable. I'm going to pull out an example here. This is Tesco. Tesco had a very horrible time in 2015, and you can see from this data here we have a business with a return on capital employed chunking along very nicely in the mid to low teens, which is a pretty good number for a retailer. In the last few years, they've dipped and they've grown, but they're still way, way, way behind. And if you look at their return on invested capital, again, up there nicely in double digits for year after year after year after year. For almost 30 years, Tesco delivered profit growth year on year. And then it all went wrong as this model starts to crumble. And you can see now their return on invested capital dropping down to very, very low single digit numbers. So that's what's happening to retailers. What is happening to suppliers? Well, suppliers, manufacturers are hit in two ways. The first way is really what does a retailer do when they're under pressure? They squeeze suppliers. And I'm not having a dig at retailers. What do businesses do when they're under pressure? They squeeze their suppliers. And manufacturers are no better or worse or no different than retailers in this situation. What do retailers do? They squeeze. They squeeze in obvious ways. They squeeze by demanding discounts, because discounts is one of the best ways we can compete. This is a Tesco store in the UK who advertises about quality. But when you walk into a store, there's one clear message about why you should shop in Tesco, and we all know who pays for this funding. So there's the obvious pressures of having to respond and fund, in effect, a retailer's competitive battle. But remember that much of this may not really be driving growth. Behind the scenes, retailers are doing more to save their profit. Here's looking at Tesco's. It's digging some data out of Tesco's P&L. You can see that 2015, what was going on there. And what Tesco's have done in terms of payables, in terms of the money they're paying out to people. They've moved from 36 days to 46 days in 3 years. That's 10 days cash flow they've taken out of the pockets of their suppliers. So even if you're selling the same amount to Tesco, you're going to get paid 10 days less. That's quite a hit. And what's happened to inventory? Tesco's have moved from an inventory turn of 16 times per year up to turning that inventory 22 times per year. If you do the math, that's around about another 6.5 days inventory taken out of their business. Again, even if Tesco's offtake was the same as it was last year, you'd be 6 days behind. That's a whole week almost behind in your sales. All done because Tesco are squeezing their costs out in ways that are going to put pressure on their suppliers. So what does that do? Well, we're beginning to see in some of the markets which are at the forefront of this, some really interesting and challenging times are happening for manufacturers, because retailers are asking for more, and they're asking suppliers to help. But manufacturers are sitting there and thinking, well, actually, I really shouldn't pay as much as I paid before, because you've got less traffic, you've got less frequency. That gondola end or that listing is less valuable to me because you're not putting it in front of as many shoppers. So partly it's a sensible pushback from a manufacturer which says that end is now worth 95% of what it was worth before. But secondly, there's a practicality to it. Manufacturers have got all of these other new channels to invest in. And unless there are sales directors and VP of sales who are sitting there saying, that's great, we've got loads more money. And if you do have loads more money, give me a shout because I can help you with that problem. Most don't. So if they're going to invest in new channels that are growing, they're going to have to find ways of reducing their expenditure or changing their expenditure in their existing channels and in their existing dominant, largest customers. And that is challenging. And the danger is that relationships become zero-based, win-lose, hostile, and destructive. As retailers are demanding more, and manufacturers are put in a tough place where they're sitting there saying, well, I can't pay more, and actually, I'd like to pay a little bit less. And at the same time, that's the manufacturer-retailer dichotomy, if you like. We also see the other challenge that is happening for manufacturers. There are shoppers not seeing their brands. You know, every shopper who goes to an Aldi or a Lidl sees fewer products in any category than they see in many other retail environments. That's a whole bunch of shoppers that don't see your brand. Any shopper who goes to a specialist may not see your brand. Any shopper who buys using an Amazon Dash button or an Internet of Things or whatever channel they use, in a direct consumer or a subscription channel through whatever way it might be, those are shoppers that suddenly disappear into a new channel that either might be difficult for us to market in or might be impossible for us to put our brand into. So we see this pressure and these diminishing returns really putting pressure on retailers, putting pressure on manufacturers, and putting pressure on that retail manufacturer relationship. Let's get through that. So four key implications before we get into the last sort of 10, 15 minutes about, okay, so what does it mean? Total costs go up, and certainly will go up faster than the growth that all of these channels drive. Retailers are going to put more pressure on manufacturers at a time when manufacturers want or need to divest. That damages relationships, and we know that shopper marketing efforts will become less effective because shoppers will disappear. If you're going to continue spending money on the same things in the same channels, but that channel has got fewer shoppers, you're going to get lower returns unless you do something different. Okay, so that takes me to the last piece of my jigsaw. Let me take a swig of water, thank you. Okay, so what are the core rules here, right? I mean, there's so many things I could talk about here, and I recognize there's only so much time, and hopefully Mark will invite me back one day to come back and tell you a little bit more about these things. But what I wanted to do really is to, again, from a global point of view, is to sort of say, well, here are some things that we need to acknowledge about this new retail reality. And rule zero is to acknowledge the new reality. It's rule zero because I kind of hope that everyone's there, but maybe they're not. The reality is that shoppers are not homogenous. They never have been, but perhaps that big dominant model of big box retail made us believe that shoppers were kind of homogenous. They're not. Different shoppers behave in different ways in different channels. You know, there's one shopper might be wanting to buy cheese in a specialist, coffee in a discounter, and shampoo in a hypermarket, and the next person might be wanting to buy cheese in a hypermarket, coffee in the specialist, and shampoo in the discounter. The question really is who are we targeting? But to get there, we have to recognize that it's changing, and it's just not going to be the same ever again. That can be a negative, but it can also be a positive. We need to accept that we can't win everywhere with everyone. But we don't have to. Unless you're targeting 100% market share, which if you are, good luck with that. You don't have to win with every shopper in every single environment. This is where shopper marketing has to become marketing. We have to think about which consumers are going to be important for our business to drive growth, which shoppers are going to supply product to those consumers, and where can we influence those shoppers? We don't have to win everywhere. And it's good because, as I think I've hopefully argued so far, that's pretty much impossible. I want to show you a very quick example of an organization who took that pretty much to an extreme in terms of let's choose the channel that we can win in. Let's pick the right consumers, the right shoppers, and the right channel. And this is from China. This is mobile phones. Here are some store shots. This is how mobile phones were sold right across China, from Beijing down to the smallest cities, in electronic superstores and in department stores, big retailers, each of the big manufacturers buying space from retailers, dominated by people like Samsung and big Chinese players like Vivo, all buying space. Samsung with a clear decision that they were going to win at retail, spending an absolute fortune on every single storefront, so they had the best space every single time. And then along came a company who, at the time, no one had heard of, a company called Xiaomi, who did some very clever marketing. One could argue that one of their greatest strengths was the ability to rip off the iPhone and sell it at half the price, and that was certainly part of their success story. But it wasn't just that. Xiaomi recognized that they couldn't beat Samsung at retail. And what they worked out was that they didn't need to. They became the market leader in China. And if you don't know much about mobile phones, that's a big deal. China is the largest market now on the planet for smartphones. They went from zero to market leader in 3 years without opening a single store, in a marketplace which was completely dominated by spend at retail. They opened a new channel and went online. Now, as Amazon have done, Xiaomi have now opened up stores. They've recognized that now they've got some scale, they can win offline. But they chose which consumers to win with. They understood those people as shoppers, and they created a new way of shopping at the time where most people were saying, no one would buy a mobile phone online, that's crazy. So that thinking outside the box and really thinking about where you can win and where you can influence. Number two, I'm not going to go on about promotions, but I could go on for hours. You won't win the long-term game with promotions and brackets. You don't need to. We need to move beyond promotions as the knee-jerk response of the industry towards pressure. Promotions are damaging. They typically move product to people that won't drive long-term value for our brands. People who buy on promotions are typically people who would buy our brands anyway, or are people who just buy on deals. We're getting short-term kicks, but we're not really changing things long-term. Promotions have longer-term danger. They destroy brands. Here on the left, we see Stella Artois for 20, 30 years, marketed as a reassuringly expensive beer, and still today marketed as reassuringly expensive. But in the UK supermarket, we see it stacked up at exactly the same price as Budweiser. Budweiser is many things, but not reassuringly expensive, I think. And you will also see that promotions destroy availability. We've done audits in stores all around the world. Something like 80% of the products which are off sale are on promotion. That destroys the shopping experience, so destroys retail brand value. It also encourages people to try your competitor. So, if you want, it's a great way of trying to try your competitor, put your own brand on promotion. So we've got to change the way we think about these things. And what I want to do here is just introduce a really simple idea as a case study of an activity which is desperately old school, but really, really clever. I'm going to spend a couple of moments on this because I love the fact that this is recipe cards, guys. Recipe cards is hardly cutting edge and new. And I'm using this because I want to make the point that it doesn't always have to be digital and exciting to be really, really effective. This is Schwartz. They make herbs and spices. And they recognized in the UK, and again, it was also extended into Australia, that one of the reasons people don't use herbs and spices, so the consumer insight, was that people don't know how to cook with them. So they came up with the idea of recipe cards. But the cleverness of this went one step further. They looked at recipe cards and, well, that resolves maybe a consumer problem, but it doesn't resolve a shopper problem. Because as a shopper, I'm being asked to spend quite a lot of money. I don't know if you can see from the photograph, but some of these herbs and spices, these are UK prices. That's £1.58. That's $2 for a herb. You can see someone having to spend $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 on herbs and spices to make a meal before they've bought any meat and any vegetables. That's a high risk strategy for a shopper. That's a shopper barrier. So they took the recipe cards and they introduced these little packs that you can see here at merchandise on the left, which give you all of the herbs and spices you need to make the recipe. So they reduce and overcome a shopper barrier. And then they go one step further, because on the back of that pack, they have a number of recipes. And one of those recipes requires you to buy one extra herb. So what they're also doing is encouraging repeat consumption. We give you 4 or 5 recipes. We're also going to drive repeat shopping. We're not going to ask you to suddenly go out there and buy 20 herbs, but we are going to encourage you to buy 1 or 2 more herbs. High impact, low tech, but really well thought through as a massive way of driving consumption and shopping in a way that also drives value for the retailer because it gets people returning as well. As you can see on the right, this was all done as an exclusive with Sainsbury's, a big retailer in the UK. So again, it's a win-win-win. It's a low-tech solution, but a pretty clever execution of consumer shopper retail value. Okay, rule number 3, be ready for whatever you're not expecting. This is a very simple story. You can see here, this data shows personal care and cosmetic sales online. And you can imagine if you worked for a personal care or cosmetic company and you were based in China, you're probably not really focusing on your online business because it's pretty tiny. But in 2 years, China went from being nothing to being the largest online market for personal care and cosmetics. If you're sitting there thinking, my category is not really going to be affected by these changes, or I can't really see these things happening, be careful, because it doesn't always happen in nice, simple, linear lines. My last rule brings us back to collaboration. We've done lots of interviews with manufacturers and retailers because we're looking at building a new product around collaboration and bringing it to the market in the next few weeks. And what we see is that there's dissatisfaction on both sides of the fence, and there is a increasing agreement that there need to be a better way of finding solutions between retailers and manufacturers, built out of this new reality of retail and shopper behavior. We're all under pressure, and both parties need to adapt. We all need to have new strategies and focuses, and one party pushing against the other, or another party walking away on the first, isn't going to fix. There's a new relationship. There's going to be a new model, and that means that we need to drive to new mutual understanding and new business plans, mutually developed, but potentially starting from a zero base. And anyone who's been reading any of my blogs will have read my views on zero-based budgeting and how it can be a power for good. It can also be a power for evil. But somewhere we have to wipe the table clear and say, okay, how are we going to build a new relationship for the future? A relationship that recognizes that consumers and shoppers have changed fundamentally, and their relationships with our brands is changing, and their relationships with retail is changing. There's a need for a new honesty. And as I said, we're looking at building a new product called Joint Business Planning 2020. And it's called 2020 because the key thesis behind it is, if we want to have a better relationship in 2020, we need to start understanding each other now, because it's going to take a long time to build a different way of working together. So at the end of this, we're going to flash up an email address if you're interested in how that might work, or if you're interested in being interviewed or talking to me about your experience of joint planning with retail or manufacturers. I'd love to do that because we're putting the finishing touches on the product right now. So even if you just want to have an input for your experience and what you'd like to see coming out of that, that would be fantastic. So I'm just going to wrap up now with a very, very quick summary slide. I've rattled through an awful lot of different things there. Please, if you do have any specific questions about things that are happening around the world or about shopper marketing in general, please just pop them into the chat. But let's just remember, shopper behavior is changing and retail is changing. We all, manufacturers and retailers, need to understand shoppers. We need to prioritize which shoppers are important to us and where and how to influence them. And we need to use all of that to build better business plans to drive ROI. At the moment, our industry is building more cost in for little growth. And whether that cost sits with the manufacturer or that cost sits with the retailer, doesn't really matter. Because what's happening is more cost is going in, and at some point that's going to reach a breaking point. And the only way to escape that is to reconfigure those costs to become better investments. And part of that is about rethinking consumers and shoppers and retail. And part of it is about using that to reconfigure the supplier-retail relationships. So that's the end of my presentation. Just a couple of additional resources. If you do want to buy my book, please, please buy it. Jeff Bezos makes more money out of it than I do, but still, I'm sure he could do with a few extra bucks. And I did also say that there was a shoppermarketingexperts.com offer. There is the discount code. If you use Disruptive within the next 30 days, you can get the annual membership down for an incredible $199, a team membership down for $2,000, $1,999. It's great. You can go and have a look for free anyway, because there's quite a lot of the content is available for free. So go and check it out. And if you like it, sign on up in the next 30 days, and I'll see you there in the forums, because I'm there pretty much every day, asking questions and answering questions and things like that. So thanks very much for listening. Apologies for the technical glitch at the beginning, and back to you, Mark.
Well, thanks, Mike, again, for your partnership in this area and working closely with the GMDC Education Council. This, I feel, not only deepens our insights, but also helps our brands and retailers know how to remain relevant. Everything that you've said certainly rings true. It's good to bring light to this, because operators and brands, or retailers and brands, are such good operators that sometimes we need to really come out of the deep water and take a look around in regards to what's going on, and how do we differentiate between the consumer and the shopper, two very different people. We need to talk to them very differently as well, and how do we properly market and engage to them, both now and in the future. I'm looking to get to some of our Q&As right now. We don't have any online, but I do have a few questions here that have come through by email. So Mike, someone is asking, which countries would you say are the most advanced in e-com or are seeing the most retail disruption?
Okay, it's one of those questions which probably I could answer in lots of different ways. I mean, I think picking up on the first part, Mark, which is e-commerce, I think China is by far the most developed in so many ways. And given where it's come from in the last 5 years, it is the place to watch. I mean, if you're interested in the future of e-commerce, if you're interested in mobile payments and how things like that work, China is the place to go, because their trajectory is so fast. It is quite astonishing. We're having clients who have seen their share of their business online going from being 1 or 2% to suddenly being 30% within 2 years. And that, no matter how good you are and no matter how responsive you are as a business, that's quite a challenge. And again, all of those challenges that people are seeing, well, that's great. So I need to build an e-commerce team. Great. So that resolves my e-commerce, and everyone then focuses on how to build my e-commerce team. And then suddenly everyone's saying, well, hold on a second, that's causing another problem, because that's great, but Walmart are on the phone saying they need loads more money, but they've gone from being like 25% of my business to being 18% of my business. How do I handle that? I can't just brush them off because they're still 18% of my business, right? But I can't invest in them like they were 25% and growing. So the problem is the industry's kind of one step behind the curve. E-commerce bursts, and so everyone chases e-commerce. Then offline starts to feel the pain, so everyone starts now having to reconfigure their business to say, how are we going to handle offline? And then the next wave, I was on the phone to a client recently, is e-commerce is doing route to market now. And China is a very mixed market. There are still many parts of China which are dominated by small mom and pop shops, supplied via networks of distributors. And suddenly you have distributors with a territory that they've been given. You've got exclusive distribution rights in this territory. And the distributor's phoning up and saying, look, I used to have 3,000 outlets to sell to. Now 1,000 of those outlets, and I buy in directly from Alibaba. My business is unsustainable. So you've now suddenly an extra 1,000 outlets have gone to Alibaba. That's fine. But the 2,000 which have not gone are now at risk because your distributor can't make any money. And at the same time, he's also threatening to sue you because the distribution agreement you had was exclusive. So he's saying, go tell Alibaba to stop, please. And that's kind of difficult now because Alibaba is the biggest company on the planet virtually. So this ripple effect is changing, and it's difficult, I think, for organizations just to keep up. And what we're saying to our clients is, it's not necessarily about keeping up, it's about building a business which is now configured for uncertainty and configured for change. And I think for me, that's the big lesson here. That last slide of the first part of the deck, which was, we don't know what's going to win. And I think that's the hardest thing. We've had certainty for so long. We kind of knew who was going to be the top big retailers for the next year. They were going to be the ones who were there last year and the ones that were there the year before. And I think our marketing has been configured for certainty. And I think now people suddenly say, well, what's the new certain? And I think that's the wrong question. And what China says is, you know what, in 2 years' time, it's going to be something else. Mobile payments are going through the roof. I was in China a few weeks ago, and I was the only I went to a Starbucks like every morning to pick up a cup of coffee. And in 4 or 5 days, I was the only person I saw there using cash. Everybody else is using their smartphone. It's just flipped. And that's changed in 18 months. So I think the lesson from places like China is, you can't be ready for, there is no certain tomorrow. We have to configure our businesses to be more flexible for whatever tomorrow will bring. And I think that's hard. I think if we could say that it's going to be this and that's what it's going to be, You see so many people presenting on what tomorrow is going to look like, and this is the store of tomorrow. But the reality is we don't know, and I think that's the wrong set of questions. So that's the learning from China. Other markets are going in different directions, but if you're based in the US and you want to keep an eye on what's happening in the world of e-commerce, find a couple of feeds of what's going on in China. It'll be very intuitive and very interesting, insightful.
To enhance that conversation, Mike, would you say that we should not be focused on the store of the future, but in fact be focused on the consumer experience? Because that's the foundation of what shopping will be over the next few years. It's really all about the experience, and not really about product and placement and incremental and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting build, Mark. And I think I certainly agree with, let's not fixate about the store of the future. I think that's there's a sort of a dialogue that's been driven by a whole bunch of people who find an audience. You know, I have a new digital thing, whatever my digital thing is, and I'm selling it to people who want to know the answer to that question. And I agree with you. I would extend it to the consumer and the shopper of the future. I've got a shopper marketing bent, I guess, so it's built into me. But I think, you know, rather than chasing the retail model, the question more fundamentally is the genie is out of the bottle. You know, the people went to hypermarkets and superstores not because they were brilliant, but because there wasn't much choice really. And now shoppers and consumers have got choice. We've got more choice about what to use and what to buy and where to buy it than ever in the history of forever. And I think therefore the smart money is on understanding the consumer and the shopper, and then saying, great, so if I can get that will give me the predictivity, if predictivity is a word, that will allow me, probably isn't, but I just made it up, that will allow me to predict.
It's okay, I make words up all the time, Mike.
Absolutely. It kind of makes sense. Predictivity. I'm going to trademark that. That would allow me to be able to predict what types of things and what types of experiences need to be delivered at the consumer interface and at the purchase interface. Those two interfaces will exist until we get to completely everything on demand, which is some way off. That, I think, is the key. I don't think it's chasing retail. I think the key is about going down to the heart of consumers and shoppers. Say, great, that first point I made, you don't need to win with them all. Which consumers and shoppers do we need to win with? Which of those can we win with? Which of those can we create something different that our competitors cannot? Own that, and then take that to retail channels and say, hey, look, I can leverage this with you, rather than trying to turn around the other way and saying, I'm stuck with this channel. How do I leverage this channel against shoppers and consumers? I think that would be the way I would phrase that, I guess.
And Mike, to go back about making up words, I think our vernacular is being transformed as quickly as the disruption that we see in the market. The way not only the way we think, but also the way we talk about what's going on in the industry right now is continually being changed. And we're hearing people all the time, as we hear different keynote speakers across all different platforms talk about new concepts. So there's not just disruption in how business is taking place, but there's disruption in how we market and how we even talk about marketing to some degree. So we're all trying to play catch up and trying to really operate at the speed of the consumer right now. And that's a very tough job. We do have time. We're getting close to the top of the hour. We do have time for one more question. Mike, how should companies better manage shopper marketing in their organization? What tips do you have?
Okay. There was a time, Mark, I was very, very certain about this answer. And we did quite a lot of research about exactly how shopper marketing should work. And I think I've now done even more research and looked at more and more organizations, and I'm coming more and more to the conclusion that asking questions about organization and how we structure ourselves isn't necessarily the best way. I think the starting point for that goes back to what we were just talking about. Actually, I could probably answer it as a continuation from that. I think in the past, there have been a number of different models of how you integrate Shopper into your business. There have been models which look at Shopper as being very much part of my retail operation. And there's been other models where it's been very much part of a marketing organization. Other times it's a completely separate thing. In the last 6 months, the data I'm seeing, and certainly the shift in the future, I think is pushing me in one direction. In the past, I would have said the jury's out. Actually, there are 3 different models, and there are plenty of people who have managed different models of working and different models of operation. And there's plenty of success. For everyone who has got success by structuring and configuring their organization by method 1, there's another one who's done it with method 2. I think what I can see now is that balance is shifting rapidly towards thinking of shopper marketing as marketing. Everything that I see suggests that we should be thinking of bringing consumer marketing and shopper marketing closer together, and recognizing that that means that shopper marketing may then become, by definition, more distance from retail. But I think that is probably the right direction to go in. I think the lines between consumer and shopper are getting so blurred. I think that the connection there becomes more valuable than potentially the shopper retail connection. Now, having said that, businesses have still got to manage this continuum. Until everything becomes a direct to consumer model and every single retailer in the world is dead, which probably won't ever happen, retail is a part of the mix. And we've got to find ways, regardless of our organization, to do what I've tried to show in some of these examples. Building a model that says, which consumers are we targeting, which shoppers are we targeting, which retail environments are important. We've got to transcend organizational structures one way or another. But the biggest challenge right now I see in most of the organizations I work with is integrating consumer and shopper. So anything that you can do as an organization to get those 2 things together, to recognize that it's different, to recognize that usage and purchase are 2 different behaviors, finding a way to be able to say, let's recognize those differences, but let's bring those closer together, is the overall direction that we see to be successful today, and I think will be successful in the future.
That's great. Well, Mike, thanks again for being on. You alluded to the question, will you be able to participate in this platform again? Yes, most certainly. And I know you're coming to the US soon, and we'd like to send out some more information about other speaking engagements that you're doing as you come to the US, but certainly we'd like to host you on this virtual platform in the future as well. So thanks again for your thoughts and your leadership today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for everyone for listening. See you soon. To be able to say, let's recognize those differences, but let's bring those closer together, is the overall direction that we see to be successful today, and I think will be successful in the future.
That's great. Well, Mike, thanks again for being on. You alluded to the question, will you be able to participate in this platform again? Yes, most certainly. And I know you're coming to the US soon, and we'd like to send out some more information about other speaking engagements that you're doing as you come to the US, but certainly we'd like to host you on this virtual platform in the future as well. So thanks again for your thoughts and your leadership today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for everyone for listening. See you soon.
So back to our viewers, we'd like to make sure that the insights today on our presentation will be available online sometime next week, and we'll send you an email so you can begin to share that with other viewers, both inside your organization or if you'd like to share it with other trading partners. If this is your first time viewing a GMDC Infocast, I'd like to make sure that you're aware that this session and all previous Infocasts can be found on our archive at gmdc.org, along with the schedule to register for future Infocasts. I'd also like to encourage you to get involved with GMDC and become a member. Today's Infocast is a small sample of what members have access to. GMDC is a business ecosystem that helps you connect, collaborate, create, and enable commerce in the GM and HBW industry. For more information, please feel free to reach out to me directly, markm@gmdc.org. And I'd love to help you find opportunities to get your company exposed to high-level profile executives and decision makers. Thanks for joining us again today. We hope the rest of your week is as productive as this lunch hour has been. Thank you. Take care.